welcome to the Science Fiction and Fantasy Factory. I'm your host, Mookie Spitz, and I'm thrilled to have Catherine Cruzan in the factory with us today. Welcome, Catherine.
Hi, Mookie. It's wonderful to be here.
It was wonderful to run into you at WonderCon.
Yeah.
What is it now, a couple weeks ago?
It feels like a couple years ago in dog years.
Those festivals and conferences are super fun, and they're also super exhausting. I can imagine setting up. I was at LA Comic-Con, Pasadena Comic-Con. I went to the LA Festival of Books just last week. And
nice.
like you, I'm an author too. So I was peddling. So I know what it's like to be on the other end where you need to set it up and display and talk to 1,000 people and keep pitching your books. But it is a unique and fun experience. Do you like doing these in-person conversational book pitches, talk to real people about your books?
You know, I'm a very shy person, so it takes a lot of energy that I have to work hard to muster, but I love meeting people. I love, just the one-on-one talking to people. So if you come to my table, I'll talk to you all day if you want. But it's also, hard for somebody who's not used to having to, I'd live in my pajamas in a dark cave, indefinitely if I was able to, and just do nothing but write. But as you know, we writers find ourselves in this position to have to be marketers and publicists and everything else, and it's not our comfort zone typically.
Well, more power to you for overcoming that hurdle. As a self-published author, you make great points that you need to market yourself, and it doesn't come naturally to natural introverts. And I'll make a confession, even though I do these podcasts and I'm come across as the bald, bubbly guy, I think I fall into the category of extroverted introvert. So if I have one-on-one and I have touch points with people, I love to talk and dive in deep. But I'm like you. If I had my way, I would be in my skivvies, in my Mookie cave, creating content and even doing my POV videos, which is also comes across as kind of showy and even exhibitionist, but it's me, myself, and I. So I personally completely relate to this challenge that many writers face, that got to go out there and talk about your books and sell them. But you did a pretty good job because you got yourself on my podcast. So welcome. From one introvert to another, I will go easy on you.
I appreciate that.
Relax. It's all okay. This is an introvert safe zone.
Awesome.
Let's make the most of it. I really enjoy your books. You've got Elfkind.
Elfkind. Like humankind.
I pronounced your name correctly, but not your book. So it's not Elfkind like German, it's Elfkind.
Yeah, think of it like humankind, Elfkind.
Elfkind is humankind, and you create the entire elf universe. I'll pass the mic to you to let our listeners and viewers know all about it. But just this backdrop, it's first in a trilogy, and you've completed the trilogy and presumably more to come.
Already working on the fourth book, yeah. But I do have the first trilogy completed.
Great. And in the notes below, folks, both on YouTube and Spotify, Apple, wherever you're listening, I'll have links so you can pick Catherine's stuff up. But without further ado, tell us, like you did me at WonderCon, for your Elfkind universe.
Well, like most writers who end up on this path, I wanted to start writing the stories that I want to read, and I've been a long time fan of fantasy. I have a huge love for reading, and I grew up reading. My mom read to us when we were children, so it's always been about having my nose in a book. Which aligns nicely with my introvert personality. So if I could disappear somewhere with my nose in a book, or writing a story that I would like to read, that's where I have spent most of my time, even as an adult. Um, and it's been really exciting because, seeing the Tolkien universe brought to life by Peter Jackson, and um, I'm a huge fan of like Raymond Feist and Tad Williams, and um, it's seeing some of those authors in the fantasy realm, cross media, start doing graphic novels and things like that. It starts to play into my love for anime because I do also spend a lot of time playing Dungeons and Dragons and watching anime and everything else. So just giant nerd. So the stories that I started with short stories, kind of skip around between science fiction and fantasy and horror. I even had a friend, uh, tell me a story about something that happened to her, and I was like, oh my god, let me please make a story out of that. So one of them is even based on a real experience that a friend of mine had. Um, and and then came the novels, right? So um it's I would live in the world of Tolkien if I could. I would probably be in Lothlorien right now if I had my choice.
I could
So
see little pointy ears behind your headset.
I have them covered with my headset right now, but yeah, they're pointed. I had the Weta Studio do elf ears on me at San Diego Comic Con one year, and there were all kinds of pictures of like, ooh, look at I'm an elf.
Yeah.
So that's definitely where I love to be. So, but I also wanted to, tell a story from a modern voice. I tend to try to pull back on the scaffolding, and instead of the purple prose and the very big, descriptive passages, what matters to me is the characters. I want the scaffolding to sort of fall away for the reader and just be able to follow these characters around. When I read Dragonbone Chair by Tad Williams, I just wanted to follow those characters around all day. And those were the kind of characters that I wanted to build and write. And, with a modern voice and, where some of the female protagonists can have a larger voice and a larger role in the various goings on of the plot points and such. So, and yet love to write myself a good battle scene. The newest book that just came out, there's a 2-chapter battle scene in there. It took a full 2 chapters to kind of play all of that out because there were a lot of plot points that I was bringing together from the first 2 books as well, sort of tying it up in a really nice bow for the trilogy. Um, and so it's really about ensuring that what they are, how they speak is engaging and natural. The things that pull me quickly out of the story when I'm reading, is unnatural dialogue or on the nose dialogue where they're like, I am going to tell you what's happening right now by having a conversation that tells you what's happening right now. I really wanted it to be that sort of natural flow that just pulls you into the story and whips you along. And if you can read my book in a day or two, I'm thrilled. I want them to be an easy read.
Well, you claim to be introverted, but you've tapped into many of the trends and best practices that I personally think work for a wide audience and exemplify best practices for what constitutes great writing. Science fiction, fantasy, and horror, too, they sometimes succumb, I would say often succumb to a lot of the opposite of what you do, which
Yeah.
is world building instead of character. And then when they do have the characters, oftentimes two-dimensional little cutouts who fulfill the role of moving the plot forward or describing things actually engage. Too often they do exactly what you described. They communicate unnaturally because they're just a prop. They're just a vehicle to build the world better or move the story along in case you haven't been paying attention. And we see this in film all the time too. It drives me nuts when one character is literally telling another character what that character is feeling, thinking, and doing is about to do. Sometimes they talk while they're doing it, And after the scene unfolds, they decompress and tell each other about it.
We just don't, human beings don't communicate that way. They're losing the beauty of subtext. They're losing the beauty of nuance, of understanding. Body language is important even in the written word. And, if you're missing that, you're missing 80% of communication. And I don't want to tell you something. I want you to feel it. I want you to be in it and surrounded by it. So, there's a lot of world building that's required if you want your characters to also feel natural, right? You need that rich world building. But please don't expect me to spend 2 pages describing the folds of the drape of the fabric of the curtain to you. There are some acclaimed, wonderful, amazing authors out there who can do amazing things, with these descriptions, but that's not how I write because I want the characters to take you away. And so, it's about building the landscape. I have, my own tropes for establishing the magic system and how magic works in my worlds. It's important to me to have an elven society that is familiar but distinct and different, and has its own personality as well. So you don't feel like you're reading a modern Tolkien, but it feels natural and comfortable because it's reflective of the things that I love about those authors that have shaped me as a writer.
That exemplifies a lot of confidence in your work because, frankly, when I see people overdoing it with the world building and with the dialogue, they lack the confidence in their own storytelling skills most often, and they also lack confidence in their reader. They're dumbing down their reader. They're assuming that the reader is A, not paying attention, so you have to keep reminding them of everything. B,
Right.
they're not gonna get it. So there's almost no subtext because subtext is demanding, and you're assuming that they're paying attention, they understand the story, and here's what's really missing: they're putting their heart and soul into the narrative. So just like you were describing the dragon tale that was your favorite, you can't wait to dive back in. You're vested in the characters. You're living the story alongside them. And most significantly, you're living the story within them. And through them, you feel their challenges. You're hyped with the aspiration of their goals. And you're a part of the story, so you can't wait to keep turning the pages because you're in it to win it.
Yeah.
And authors, whether they want to or not, create the opposite circumstance, which is you're providing all that scaffolding and all that reinforcement, and you're making all these tacit assumptions about how dumb and inattentive they are, that it sucks the life out of a narrative. And it's very frustrating for someone who is more discerning and who really wants their engagement with the narrative to be participatory.
Yeah. I want all of that to fall away so that you're in that place where you're just, again, following those characters around. What's going to happen next? And hopefully there's enough, mystery and nuance and everything else that, makes you want to find out. And maybe it didn't happen the way you thought it would. And maybe there are some surprises. That's what I'm hoping to do. Some of my favorite compliments from readers have been things like, "Oh my God, you made me start crying in the middle of work at a lunch break," and my boss came in and I was sobbing, and it's fantastic. The fact that you care about what just happened there enough that you're crying, it tells me that I've written something that you have connected to, and that's what's important. Yeah.
Tell us about the fundamental theme. So I've noticed, and to your point, you adopt tropes around systems of magic, but people need relatability, but you have your own spin.
Yeah.
You also have your own spin of what would be considered the hero's journey.
Yeah.
Like the young elf, she's protected, she's got a good life, and then not so much. So can you share some of these essential themes that are recurring throughout your books and also relate them maybe to your own emotional catharsis? Is there something that you're tapping into? Because you create good characters who are relatable, and I'm assuming that they were quite relatable for you, their creator.
Yeah. It's I I have like really strong ties to, spirituality and just nature. And, I grew up in Minnesota in the deep woods. So, I spent a lot of time in the woods and such. And so the magic system that I created is definitely naturally based. But you'll see notes to things like auras and sort of metaphysical, natural energies and such, which is, where you would expect magic to come from if we really did, tap into and have the ability to tap into those energies and use them in ways that, it's just one step further from what I think a lot of us already experience. With regards to the characters, um, it's every book has a sort of um, pitting of human versus elven, so that I can touch on some of the things that strike me with regards to like how our human relationships go. You're always facing some kind of push and pull and tension, and we're in this amazing melting pot, and our environment has even over the last 10 years changed significantly in how we interact with each other. And in some ways, we've made great strides in, how we, bridge the difference between races and religions and men and women and and in other ways we've stepped back, significantly in a lot of ways. And so there's always this tension and push pull. I'm a woman who, has spent, 30 years working in a male dominated industry, and that shapes who I am as a human being. Having really strong friendships with men and being very comfortable being surrounded by men all the time. But there are also underlying, things that we face as women in these environments, um, as many people know, that that are a struggle. And so many of us do that, quietly, silently, especially for someone like myself, having entered um, the industry that I'm in at a very young age. Many years ago, I was, that person with their shoulder against the glass ceiling, like pushing, 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 and so you see a lot of that in my character building as well. They're not where they could be or they should be, and it's going to take a lot of effort to make the strides that they need to make in order to affect change, the change that they need to see in their kingdom and their society. And there's also, there's the human versus elven element. How they feel about each other. There's the um, just the push and pull between the races there, and I bring in a dwarvish society as well. So, um, again, doing things very differently, but also, speaking to things that were affecting the writers at the time who created, these elements, right? Um, you know, Things like the Chronicles of Narnia and Tolkien's Hobbit and Lord of the Rings, definitely touch on the political nature of, what they were experiencing in their days. And we're certainly seeing evolution of those politics, in today's time. So I'd like to think that there's been a little bit of evolution in how I'm writing these societies and how, the different people are playing against each other. And then you have the different, um, you know, human kingdoms as well, different priorities. So and then of course you see the D&D love sneak in there as well. So I have a savvy thief, trying to escape the grips of the Thieves Guild, because he wants to affect his own fate, and have some ability to be autonomous and shape his life. So he enters a bargain with a dark sorcerer. All he needs to do is trade an elf, and he'll get that stone of power that he needs to be able to shape the life that he wants, and everything goes wrong from there. Nothing goes right, right? It's that comedy of errors that is not so funny when you're finding yourself tied to a tree, surrounded by a pack of wolves, wearing nothing but your your wits and and a rope that's got you tied fast. You know, kind of the fun things that I stick my characters into. They're not, um, you know, there there are dark elements that present themselves because there's darkness in the world that we're all working through. But I'd like to think that there's also that, you know, but we can rise above. Where is that hope, and where am I drawing that hope from, and who am I connecting with who's going to help bolster that hope that I'd like to build for myself?
Very cinematic and very visual and very inchoate and almost instinctive in this tension between dualities.
Yeah.
I could see much of this in a big screen kind of adaptation. What do you think of Peter Jackson's Lord of the Rings adaptation, especially the elves, the Hugo Weaving as Elrond
I
and the whole cast of characters?
Yeah, I mean, I struggle to find fault. To be honest,
That's the biggest praise I think I've ever heard. Quote, I've struggled to find faults. That's terrific.
you know, I was even accepting of some of the changes that he made. Um, you know, I understood why he did some things differently. Why, you know, why Arwen was there at the river crossing for Frodo. You know, it's not written that way in the book, but um, I was okay with him doing that because he was bringing a character forward for cinematic purposes, and you know, tying her into plot points to make her presence there even, you know, necessary, right? You know, notes and notations that Tolkien had, you know, that were brought forth and actually given, you know, life on the screen. And, you know, we as modern writers, you know, we can't help but be affected, you know, by the movies and television and everything else that we watch. Um, I extremely love what the Prime series has done because you've got a lot of Tolkien fans who have created the Rings of Power series, and so they have brought to bear, you know, what every Tolkien fan is like, yes, this is exactly, you know, how it is in the notes. And if you read the Silmarillion, you know, you're going to see this information and you're bringing it to bear exactly how it plays out, and it's cinematically, you know, gorgeous to look at. They're bringing in the most amazing actors to bring these characters to life, and so I do, I struggle to find fault with it. I love it. I love every minute of it. Just it also helps, you know, bring the love of fantasy to a whole new audience and new generations who may not connect to reading books. You know, it's how, you know, like now that there are movies and television series, you know, reflective of these amazing works of art, you are able to hit broader audiences who are like, well, maybe now I'm going to pick up a book and start reading because, you know, there's a lot of you know, books that have not been brought to life, you know, um, and you're only going to discover them on the page.
Absolutely. A novel is not a play, is not a movie. And
That's
we've
right.
seen many very talented, creative people blow it over and over again when it came to Lord of the Rings. Ralph Bakshi, the noted animator, gave it a whirl, and that didn't quite work out. And the first Harry Potter movie, talking about fantasy, where J.K. Rowling pretty much in the contract had to have rights on the movie itself, calling shots. And as a writer, you have different contingencies than as a director and producer. And you make a great point that an adaptation cannot stay literal to the text because you would have, for starters, a 40-hour long movie.
Yeah.
And to the other great point you made, you might have to move stuff around for the sake of dramatic tension of what's demanded of a film. And Chris Columbus got more creative license as the movies became increasingly popular, and J.K. Rowling got a chance. Okay, you guys got this.
I'll take a
And
step back now.
yeah, and Peter Jackson is an excellent storyteller.
Yeah.
I think James Cameron is quite excellent too, because they understand that they're making a movie and they're not retelling a book, and they stay true to the medium in which they are the aficionado. And the studio needs to trust their talent. And in
Yeah,
cases like where Cameron is a terrific success, I think the first Avatar movie was quite exceptional, and Peter Jackson's trilogy, which by the way were all shot pretty much at the same time, right? The same
yeah, the
energy
same
went into
timeline.
it,
Yeah,
the same deal. Really worked. And to your great point, if they do it right, if they don't blow it, because we've seen our favorite books get wrecked over and over again, then
or
the audience is electrified. Like my
yeah,
favorite character in the Jackson adaptation is a super minor character, but just visually, my jaw literally dropped. The gatekeeper of Mordor. I don't even remember. I don't. It's like such a minor character, but his look
yeah,
was so menacing, and I was put into that world. It was so visceral and
yeah.
believable.
Well, and
And
just the gates themselves, right? When you
those
see them,
two,
you're like, wow, you just kind of ripped that out of my head and made it even better.
yeah, even that's it, even better. I thought the gates of Mordor were much smaller. They were obviously corrugated and maybe like bloody and rusty. Okay, but Peter Jackson made that whole world of Sauron so epic
Yeah,
in scale
yeah,
that it exceeded your own imagination.
yeah,
And then it's winning. And as a reader, you want to do that for your reading. You know what I mean? You want the book because you're coming into a novel like yours, having that oeuvre ready. They've probably read Lord of the Rings. They've probably been familiar with the oeuvre that you're drawing from, and you need to take it to another level. Did
yeah.
you feel some pressure that way because you're operating in a universe that's established, has its own nomenclature and tropes?
Yeah.
Was that
Uh,
tough for you to stake your own claim and give it
I
a,
think
a fresh Cruzan whirl?
I think it's why it took me so long to really get started and finish a full novel because I was intimidated, as you expressed, right? And when you see, you know, series of books, you know, do so many epic things, and you're like, oh, I'm gonna, give this a whirl, give it a try. It can be very intimidating. So, um, I was talking with Terry Brooks after he was, kind of supporting Christopher Paolini in one of his book signings, and he was kind of tucked off to the side. And I had talked to him a lot. He's a little bit of a mentor for me, and um, we were, just kind of talking about, getting Elfkind, kind of started off the ground. I had just secured my first agent. We were working on securing my first publisher because Elfkind was originally published the old school way. And, we were having this conversation about character. And, um, he said, like, don't try to be comparing yourself to what I'm doing or what Robert Jordan is doing. Don't be intimidated by that. Just go in and tell your story. Climb into it, and it was some of the best advice that I had ever gotten. It was just go be true to my characters. And um, by the time we finished talking, it was funny because the Christopher's line was kind of fading out, and I looked up. I didn't even realize we were surrounded by like dozens of people who were just kind of listening and watching the conversation take place. So clearly he was telling me a lot of really great, wonderful things. Um, but it really boiled down to just let it be your voice. Let it be your voice. Um, Guillermo del Toro, um, who to me is I think one of our great storytellers. Um, I I've seen him.
Hellboy, I'm a
Love,
Hellboy fan.
yes, I have a stack of Hellboy comics just over there. Um, but it's Pan's Labyrinth for me was a little earth shaking because it it's that dark story that draws you in, um, and really leads you down this amazing, fantasy path, and you get to the end, and you're just so, you know, taken by the characters and so drawn in that you feel like you just expressed every bit of emotion you could ever muster in your lifetime.
You're smacked with human evil,
Yeah, yeah,
which just is kind of the coup de grace of that
yeah,
fantastic experience.
yeah. But if you think about it, his experience in getting to where he's at, he had a lot of people telling him no. He had a lot of people saying, no, you can't do that. Like, what are you, people are going to hate that. What are you talking about? And so, getting to, see him talk, at conventions and things like that, I was just getting ready to give up, writing at a point where I saw him and he was saying, because I had so many rejection letters, so many rejections, and he said, stop listening to the no's and just keep going. Just let it be your voice. Let it be your story, your thing, and don't let them shut you down. And I was like, oh my, what am I doing? This is what I want to be doing. I want to be writing. Um, if I could make a living as a writer, I would have quit my job a long time ago. Um, and just been writing stories. So, um, how could I give it up? Right? I've got too many voices in my head. If I don't let them out, they're just going to take over, and I'm just going to be a raving lunatic on the corner anyway. So, um, it's important to get those stories out in my voice, just like Guillermo del Toro said. He kept me from quitting. Terry Brooks kept me from quitting. Tim Powers, same thing. It's getting access to some of these authors, as a part of the Greater Los Angeles Writers Society when it existed, really made a difference for me because I got access and mentorship from some really amazing writers.
And now you're sharing that on this podcast for a lot of young or aspirational writers. A lot of my viewers and listeners are indie authors, and they're like, "Hey, Mookie, how do I do it?"
Yeah,
And you're conveying that mentorship in a way I think is very meaningful. If you're a writer, the one pattern that I see over and over again, it doesn't just happen. It's not like you're doing this and you're doing that regardless of your age, and you wake up one morning, you have your coffee or tea, and then bing, this light bulb goes up. I'm gonna be a writer. uh, I've talked to about 0 people, N of 0, who are working writers, and by working writers, it has 0 to do with your income from writing
yeah,
or how many books you sell. It has to do with this inner burning flame that you just have to tell your story, and you have to
yeah,
do it. And like you, immersed in books throughout their youth, they always felt a connection to storytelling, and they have this compulsion that overrides everything: common sense, paying the rent, this reasonable expectation of return on investment,
yeah,
because you pour hundreds of hours into something with no assurance that it'll take off. And you're making essential points, which is, if the fire burns, then don't smother it. Just pour kerosene on it. And if it burns your house down because you can't pay the mortgage, then so be it. But stay responsible. But it's not about anything outside the joy and need
yeah,
of the writer to write.
yeah.
That's
Don't,
pure and true and beautiful. And if you could get over the obstacles of expectation, especially if you're introverted, notice part of the irony here, which is like, you want to cuddle up in your jammies with a typewriter and just keep creating. But at the same time, especially when you started, you felt that you had to appease others, that you needed to be accepted from people who had no vested interest in your work to begin with, except to make money off you.
yeah. I still remember the look on the face of my agent when I had one when I approached her, because she was like a dark fantasy type person who was very much like Cthulhu and um, you know that sort of bent, if you will. And I approached her with a little card that said Elfkind on it, and she looked at me like, oh God. Like, I'm gonna hate you, and I hate you already. And and then she accepted my submission, and she 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 was with a very prominent agency here in Southern California, so it was huge that she would even look at my submission. And then she came back saying, "I want to represent you. Like, I hate like Tolkien and I hate the elves and all, and you just made me love it. So like here we go. I'm now a fan of elves." Um, it means that I did something right with regards to the voice and the characters and such, because it certainly wasn't what she was looking for. But then, you run into those same hurdles. Like, this is not what we're looking for right now. And it was safely right before the first of the Lord of the Rings movies were coming out, and so I was like, but I know that they're making a Lord of the Rings movie right now. Like, how could you not want mainstream fantasy books right now? But that's not what was hot at the time. It was dark urban fantasy. China Mieville was coming out with some really great stuff at that time, so I'm not going to knock that genre because I love it. Um, it's just, it made it really hard for those of us that were doing conventional, high fantasy to, kind of break through in terms of a voice, right? So it was just rejection, rejection, rejection. Like, every big publisher, no, thank you, right? So we ended up going with small press. So, God bless small press. And I still walked away from it because it turned out that I was still having to put in as much as I'm putting in now as an indie author, and yet I was only getting, part of those royalties on the sales and things. And I just thought, well, if I'm going to be working this hard still anyway, I'm just going to do it myself. Um, so a lot of people may be listening, going, "You walked away from a publisher? What? Are you insane?" Yeah, I wanted to keep my audio rights because that's where I was making, most of my sales was in audio. We just released the audio. It came out just yesterday. Was it yesterday or the day before? On Audible for the Winter Forest, and I have this amazing, amazing talented.
Check the link below. I'll help you pitch it.
I have this amazing talented narrator who has done all of my books, and we have this amazing working relationship. And she just brings my stories to life. And like each time I bring her a new book, she's like, "Oh my God, I'm so glad I get to be back in this world." And she brings it to life in a way that, because some of us, like, I spend 2 hours a day in traffic, getting to and from work. So I do a lot of my book reading now audio because that's the time that I have to spend, and I can't not be reading. So I still consider it reading, but somebody is bringing it to life for me in a different way. And we just started a contest to give away, copies of this audiobook for free. So check my Instagram if you want to bring.
Link below.
But yeah, it's really sort of bringing these things to life because it's your voice. It's what brings us to reading in the first place, right? Like, these characters, these stories. Um, it connects us to, some of the things that we're experiencing in real life and helps us, work through that. It helps transport us away from things that are happening in our real life. It's an escape like no other, right? It's, if I'm having a really hard day, I'm gonna go put on my headphones and listen to Jane Marsters, like, do some Jim Butcher and like go crawl into the Dresden world for a while, like, fun escapes where I don't have to deal with the day to day for at least a little bit.
I think all of these are amazing points. Just your lived experience of going through that trajectory is illuminating, especially this idea that so many authors, especially authors who are just getting started, feel that they're not legit unless they find a legit publisher. That's number one. It's like this craving for external confidence.
It's a trail of tears because
Yeah.
right now the only thing that these big publishing houses are interested in are Real Housewives with a 3 million base. That means instant sales. Unfortunately, the creative editorial types who were making choices for books that they were going to publish are making different choices now, right? They're looking for you to come in with an established base. So your best path to that level of publishing is still through indie publishing and all of the the publicity that you need to build for yourself, because you need a base. If you have, say 90,000 Instagram followers, which I do not, because I've literally been on Instagram for 5 minutes, because I've been working and writing instead. But it's time for me to, sort of take this to the next level. Um, but it's about, um, building that network and connection with art readers and, bloggers and bookstores and Insta bookstores and all of that. There's a huge. I just fell into this well of this huge community that I didn't even know existed, and they could have been there, you know, propping up my sanity this whole time, and I didn't even realize it because I was too busy writing the books. Right? It's because that takes so much time.
So myth number one, I'm going to find a publisher and then I'm going to be legit. Myth number two is after I write a book, I've done all the work and I'm going to pass it along to this mythical publisher and they're going to market me and they're going to get me in the New York Times and they're going to get me in Locus and Apex magazine and they're going to organize my schedule for upcoming podcast appearances and interviews on CNN.
Wouldn't
So
that be nice?
it would be nice. And of course, Netflix will soon be knocking on my
That's right.
door for optioning this into an incredible mini series that I frankly saw in my head as I was writing this. So no big deal transposing that. And as part of that mythology, there's the feeling that I don't really need to create my own community and I don't need to do my own marketing because I'm a genius. And it's a easy trap to fall into because as writers, we do spend most of our time writing.
Yeah.
That is our core competency. And if you're writing, you enjoy this very introverted, whether you're introverted or not, it's an introverted kind of exercise to lock yourself in a room for 100, 200, 1,000 hours working on a project.
Yeah.
That's weird. Most people would think we're crazy.
Yeah.
There are all these forces that are hitting us from all these sides, and you learned it, and I think you're applying it, that to be a successful writer, especially in 2026, when, to your point, put yourself in the shoes of a producer or an agent or a big publisher. They have the option of taking a risk with you or just going for the Real Housewives of Mars.
Yeah.
And right off
Guaranteed
right
base
off the
sales.
shelf, they're already making money.
Right.
And it's also a bandwidth issue. How many clients can an agent have? How many books can be published that get meaningful bandwidth out there in this attention starved, media dominated tsunami of content environment? And so it's like Hunger Games in reverse. The odds are not in our favor,
No.
and you have to hustle, which is probably the biggest takeaway here, is that your work actually just begins after you finished your book, if you want your book to be read.
That's right. That's right. And gone are the days of that path of following that standard method of getting into a publisher and getting published, because at the time that was the model, they were putting out a few hundred books a year. Now I think we're up to what, 2.6 million books a year. I mean, the it's the it's super saturated, the zone. So if you want to be read by anyone, how do you make your work stand out? There's so many different theories about the best way to do it, and having actual content is and valuable content, content that people will want to read. Make your work quality. Spend the time taking writers classes and understanding the actual way to write quality work, That's the first thing that you need. You can be the best marketer in the world, but if your book isn't good, um, you'll get so far, but you're not going to get any farther because people are going to realize that this is not something that they're enjoying, right? So it's really important to hone your skills as a writer and then hone your skills as a publicist and marketer.
Often it's one extreme or another, right? We talked about Silmarillion a little bit, like who's really read Silmarillion? Well, if you're a Tolkien fan, you've read it, and you're all into it, and you know the whole taxonomy
I
of
read
the
it as a
family
teenager.
of the families, right? And you got
Yeah,
all those details. You're in it to win it. The other extreme is that you're just into the marketing side rather than content.
yeah,
Another big book is Finnegan's Wake by James Joyce, and that's Joyce's Silmarillion after he wrote Ulysses, which is also incomprehensible to most. But the reason I go off on this tangent here is there's two brothers in Finnegan's Wake. There's Shem and Sean. And Shem is the writer. He creates, and all the wisdom and creativity comes from him. And Sean is the marketer. So he puts up the soapbox in the middle of the village and he's articulating and he gathers, he creates community while Shem is busy writing. Now, there's a complete archetypal disconnect between Shem and Sean because Shem gets it. He's a fountain connected with the muse. And Sean doesn't have the remotest inkling of a clue as to what Shem is trying to communicate. And it's this dichotomy between these two personality types. And internally, we struggle with this as well, which is if you're a natural writer, it's often hard to do this marketing stuff, build community. And if you're a natural social kind of person, you love contacting people and liking people so they like you and you reshare and restack and follow and your whole day is on Reddit bullshitting, then that's natural to you. And it's very, very rare for someone to play rhythm and lead guitar
yeah,
competently. And for writers, I think this is the biggest recurring dilemma that I see,
yeah,
to your point, which is I see people are geniuses at marketing. They come out of nowhere, and on Substack, they have like 4,000 followers in 2 weeks, and everyone is liking their stuff, and their stuff sucks because they don't spend any time on it. They're all into networking and connecting.
yeah,
And then I see people of scintillating talent who are completely flying under the radar. Nobody cares because they don't have that woo to just
yeah,
get people to even take a look. So I go off on this big tangent just because it's like it's instinctive. It's like part of the human dilemma that we have these conflicts. And as an indie author, if you're a natural at writing, then it's going to be tough to community build, and it's not going to feel natural, but you have to do it. And then if you're a natural at marketing and you've got 30,000 people on TikTok because you're pumping nonsense memes and loving it, then try to spend a little bit more time communicating something meaningful.
yeah. It's a hard dilemma. It can get frustrating sometimes because you see work getting promoted and you're like, my stuff is that good. My stuff is better than that.
Way better. We get jelly. We must feel it every day where, latest
Yeah.
fantasy writer. And you look at their stuff and it's like, did you GPT this in 5 minutes?
Oh, yeah, the AI dilemma as well. Um, yeah, I mean, and that's starting to rear its head as well in the industry, right? Like, are you using AI to, do some of your writing or all of your writing?
I've been friends with writers or writers, and I know that they've been toiling for years with the idea of a book. And then now I'm cooking on this podcast, right? And they're like, "Hey, Mookie, I just wrote my book. Do you wanna talk about my book?" I'm like, "Of course, you're awesome. Let me go check it out." And they'll send me the PDF or the published book, and I'm like,
Oh
hmm.
dear. Especially especially if it's a friend, right? It's like, well, you read my stuff and you're like, okay, what can I say?
Gifts from the gods have descended on you with regard to just your prose.
Yeah,
So tell us a little bit about that. Reading your stuff, I see zero AI. I see you writing every word
every
and
single
and
word.
loving it.
Yeah.
So what's your attitude toward it, especially since writers like us who actually sit here and type every word are getting crowded out by about 1 billion AI books on Amazon churning every day?
Yeah, and it's going to be harder to spot them too. But I mean, it comes down to your writing style, what you're writing and why you're writing it. Like for me, it's a bit of an escape. Like I said, I'm writing the stories that I want to be reading, and so I have a lot of um, actually Tad Williams said this, and I couldn't have agreed more. A lot of my writing process is sitting around daydreaming. So if you like, what's Catherine doing? She's just sitting in a chair staring blankly at the wall. It it really is about sort of um, devising those scenes. It's like creating a movie. It's scene by scene. How do you enter this scene? And when you leave it, what has changed? Because if something hasn't changed in the course of that scene, it's not a complete scene and it's not worthwhile and it has no bearing on your story, right? What is changing about the plot? What is changing about the character? And why is it important? Why does it belong? And just understanding, how each of those elements can very impressively and properly and beneficially affect your story or take it if you're making bad choices and not focusing on the right things. So, there's a lot of discourse about, do you outline? Do you not outline? I loosely outline. Uh, I deviate from my outlines all the time if the characters so dictate. Sometimes they run off with the plot. They say, no, 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 this is the direction we're going to go now. But it comes down to, um, having a real intimate relationship with those characters that you are building and creating, and really being able to immerse yourself in that world. And if you can't do that as a writer, your readers are certainly not going to get that from your work either. So, and then the other thing that I do, which is kind of more the frosting, um, I've touched on this, and it's very important to me, but it may not be as important to other writers. If it's tripping me up in any way, it's going to trip up my reader. And I don't want any scaffolding pulling someone out of the story. I want them to be able to read, zip wing through it so that they forget that they're reading and they're actually in the story. So, like one of my favorite things that I adhere to very strictly is if I am jiggering over a sentence or a couple of sentences, like more than 3 times, I delete the whole sentence and it's usually better just without it completely. There's no amount of words that I am married to um, that can't be changed or removed because something dictates with regards to making the story better. I've deleted whole chapters. It hurts for a minute. You kind of walk away going, "Ooh, man! Like, how much time did I spend writing that chapter? It doesn't belong anymore." But you can't be married to that because what you need to be married to is the overarching character arc and how those characters are interacting with each other and developing. And if you haven't developed your characters over the course of that story and they don't come out in a different place having learned some things, then you might want to rethink what you're writing.
David Mamet's On Directing Film is one of my favorite books for writers. It's called On Directing Film, and it's great. And the reason it's great, and the reason I bring it up, is because you're bringing up how all writing is based on the scene.
Yeah, that I got in one of my screenwriting classes. Right? It's that scene is very important.
A book, a novel, any story consists of these almost Lego pieces that
Yep.
have to be seamlessly interlocking to create the whole. And if each scene doesn't have discernible, clear, goal driven characters, and equally clear obstacles. There could be some mystery and ambiguity that fuels the subtext of the tension, but you need clarity and you need this oppositional force, and you need to discernibly see and be vested in this character getting from here to there.
Yeah.
And then the scenes are arranged, whether the story is linear or not doesn't matter chronologically. You go from A to B, B to C, C to D. And to your point, your characters sometimes might actually write these scenes for you, and scenes and whole chapters might drop out because it doesn't fit that trajectory. Like telemetry, you're in aerospace, right?
Yeah.
So a rocket either falls out of the sky or it goes successfully into orbit. And frankly, it boils down to the raw physics and engineering of it. You can't will a rocket to fly, and you can't bullshit your way into or out of a story simply rolling the dice and hoping that your ideas are all that. There needs to be this through line, and the through line is propelled emotionally to make it work. And going back to AI, now AI is machine learning intelligence. It has the IQ of maybe your cat, arguably less than that. People get deluded by how good it mimics us, but low IQ and almost zero creativity because it's using the pre-trained model to cobble together what humans have already done in a way that's probabilistically set up, like Google's autocomplete, to just finish your sentence, or in the case of some people, finish their book.
Right. With the emotional complexity of a brick. Yeah. Yeah.
As writers, this AI, not to AI, if you're really a writer, you're going to sweat through this stuff. It's going to come from your lived experience. You got a burning light in your heart that you need to be a storyteller, and you make endless and untold sacrifices to get those words on the page, and you're living and breathing it. That's not being a prompt jockey. That's the opposite of being one.
AI is going to get in my way, right? I'm going to spend as much time setting things up in a prompt as I'm going to spend just, creating the scene. It's a lot of writers are starting to use it to help them with editing, line editing, things like that. I don't see a problem with that. I'm never going to do that, because each pass that I make through a manuscript is my ability to also check continuity, make sure that I still, like, I'm not missing any critical components or ideas, things like that. I mean, it's so even the line editing pass is important for those reasons. So I'm not going to let an AI do it, because I am still making my own decisions about, the content during those sweeps as well, right? And I do a pass for dialogue, where I'm looking for each voice to be consistently tied to each character, so that you can tell who's speaking, and that in and of itself establishes, unique characterization for those characters. I do a pass for the line editing for typos. I always fail. Andrea Ems, who is my narrator for the audiobooks, she and I are always finding, like, oops, there's a typo I missed. You know, but it really comes down to, those important passes. If you let AI do that for you, you're missing critical opportunities to, weave in additional important things to your storytelling.
I think ease of use, just like Jack White of the White Stripes says, is the scourge and enemy of the creative force.
Well
If
said.
you could just plug and play and prompt jockey it, just press a button and it all goes away, all the passion is removed from the creative and artistic process. And any artist worth their chops will tell you that that grind and that hard work is what comes up and into and through it.
Yeah.
Anthony Bourdain made an amazing career out of a short story that he wrote that exemplified that the kitchen in a restaurant is like a submarine. It's hot, it's sweaty, it's dangerous, and it's one of the most awful places to work. And in that blood, sweat, and tears, amazing meals that produce so much pleasure in the dining room are engendered. And it's that dichotomy between just sweating it out and creating beauty is just a natural part of that process. And I think it applies very much to the written word too.
Yeah.
It's joyful hell. And if you make it happen, then your readers can feel it. It's
Yeah.
translating all of that passion. And I love how you go over stuff over and over again, and you're your own editor, and then you just get rid of stuff. My debut science fiction book, I wrote in 3-line paragraphs obsessively. So it looks almost like lyric poetry and like tweets. I'm actually tweeting it backwards on X to just because I can, because each paragraph is symmetric. They all look alike on the page. And I did that for my own OCD reasons, because I felt just prose is so ad hoc. Like, why is one paragraph this size and the other smaller? It's so arbitrary. You're a scientist, you work in aerospace, like coding is kind of interesting, and it also puts you in a box, and then you need to gamify your writing. And to the great point you just made, it forces you to rethink and recalibrate and rewrite to make it fit. So this accomplished 2 goals, things I never would have thought of. I'm thinking of just to make it fit, syntax versus semantics. And the other one is I was a good proofreader, even though I'm really ADHD, as you could probably tell. My book had very few typos, even in the initial draft, because I had to keep rewriting sentences to get it to fit into the zany formatting. So that's fun. You can gamify, live within your words instead of just pressing a button.
Yeah. Well, I mean, AI is there's no concept of subtext or nuance or anything like that from an AI, right?
Be true to yourself, folks. As a writer and as a reader, like, be sensitive to being bamboozled by AI, and in ways the audience is already starting to react. OpenAI had that application called Sora, which launched to much fanfare, which enabled user-generated 10-second clips of dynamic AI content. So all of a sudden you're having a waltz with Beethoven or whatever, and it's your actual image. And there was backlash to it. It created a torrent of fake news and a flood of garbage in all the social channels and bad reputation management for OpenAI. So I think the public is already getting a little sick of this, and you can't spend a nanosecond on social media without these obviously AI generated memes and descriptors. And a lot of people don't notice and don't care, but there's already a backlash to it.
Yeah. It feels just insincere. It feels insincere. But I mean, use AI to your benefit, with marketing and publicity where you can. Just, but let your creativity, let your creation, your work, your stories be yours.
As I mentioned to other guests too, I used AI for research.
Yeah.
So in my
I
zany
don't trust it
3-line
for research.
paragraph novel, I've got hard science. Everything from quantum mechanics to weird ideas in cosmology and all sorts of speculative stuff, but also stuff grounded in the mass of the Higgs boson that figures into my book. Yeah. Go figure. So I wanted it to be true to the science, because when you pull it out of your butt, it doesn't work. And it also forced me to think through stuff in ways that I think added to the book. So use the tools, but drink responsibly.
Yeah, exactly. Well, make sure that you're double checking, because it makes stuff up too, right? Sometimes AI hallucinates, and
just like we do.
You want to make sure that it's giving you the correct science, the proper science. So and you can always cross check all of that. Like, if you're able to confirm everything that it's producing, then it is a really good source for that kind of thing.
Another point that you brought up earlier that I'd like to bring back, in a sense, to bring us full circle too, is the idea that science fiction and fantasy is a terrific genre for being able to express a lot of deeply personal stuff and also be reflective of the climate in which we exist, especially now with 2 steps forward, 3 steps back with regard to just so many things that frustrate us. And to bring that to life on the page, and to do it without it being ideological or political, but just deeply heartfelt, is something that science fiction has done very well since it really started cranking out. All the way back to Jules Verne, H.G. Wells,
Yeah.
with the Martian invasion. Even The Invisible Man has deep political subtext as well.
Dark they were.
And you brought that up. Brought
Yeah.
that up earlier. So can you tell us a little bit more about how it's that release for you, and how does that go into the audience that you're trying to pull together? So it's kind of two parts. One is the feeling that goes into your books, and the other is creating community, going on Instagram, finding your people.
Yeah. Um, that's a lot. It's you know, we go through so much, especially it feels like in recent years we've been through so much as a country, as a global community, and that wears on us as human beings. As feeling creatures that have empathy and sympathy and understanding, and sometimes not understanding, and um, you know it's we have proven through science fiction going all the way back to the greats, right, that they are able to reflect and mirror back to people things that like messages that they will not accept if you just try to tell them about prejudice, if you just try to tell them about um, enslavement or um, you know genocide, things like that. It's you can't get those messages across with directly speaking about them, but you can certainly reflect it back to a population in storytelling in a way that you're sneaking it past them, sort of, right? Because we do trust our readers to be very smart and intuitive and understanding, and it gives them a safe place to visit what they believe, what they think, how they process the things that are happening um, in today's society. I think it has done a lot to create empathy and allyship because so many groups really require their allies, especially these days. Um, and so I don't try to preach, I don't try to wag my finger at things, but I carry my lived experiences into my writing. There's no way around it. So there's a lot of maybe subtextual investigation with regards to the relationships and the interactions that characters have with each other, sort of how different things are playing out. In my world building, there is politics. There has to be politics in order to have a complete worldscape. So even the way the maps are drawn and how the different nations interact with each other and how that politics plays out is definitely reflective of the world that we're living in. And so maybe I'm investigating or exploring on a personal level, through this writing, how some of that, how I can even make peace with some of that or make decisions about how I want to see things play out, based on. Um, I think the word, I think it comes down to hope. I think it comes down to not being overwhelmed to the point that you become frozen and unable to move forward. We need, like as Einstein said, right? You're on a bicycle. If you don't keep pedaling, you're going to fall over. So it's really important to keep moving forward. But how do you move forward in the face of some of the things that we're living through? It's got to be through community. It's got to be through our relationships with our fellow human beings and that allyship that we need to provide to our struggling communities. And that's going to play out in everything that I write.
That's a terrific mission statement almost. Building community, let's say on Instagram, you're beyond just another science fiction, fantasy slash horror writer. You're connecting with people who are like-minded souls who are in a similar boat you are, who want to share your catharsis. So the challenge is to connect the dots. right? How do you reach out in a way where that becomes transparent, engaging, and impactful? How are you able to get your books out there and communicate that sensibility when people are?
Well, that's the question, right? The swipe, swipe, swipe.
I have a similar challenge. My science fiction novel is hard science. It's Douglas Adams meets William Gibson with
Nice.
all these other zany authors thrown in, and I could describe it that way. But thematically, it's basically the Gen Z Zoomer gender wars
Mm,
brought to life. You have a Gen Z male who's a narcissistic loser, opportunist, exhibitionist, extreme sports enthusiastic, drug addicted freak. And then you have his complement, who is a very hardworking, focused, creative, conscientious female. And it exemplifies it's stereotypical, but it exemplifies the gender rift,
yeah,
which is now more acute than ever before. And frankly, women are doing better than men. It's in Pew Research, it's all
yeah,
there, and women are paying for that.
yeah.
That's the essential theme of my book, even though it's a reality engine and space opera battles. So the challenge that I have is how do I get folks to get it and build up enthusiasm and ultimately succeed in communicating this very basic yet I think fundamental and important reality that we're living in right now, because this younger generation is going to create the next world. And if we don't fix the battle between men and women in power, that's a bigger deal, I think, than the AI revolution, frankly. We have societal issues that we need to fix and we need to reconcile because it's not working out.
I couldn't agree more. And the everything that we're seeing is reflective of, I think, the core that you just struck on, right? It's, I mean, women have had to fight for everything that we've got, so we don't know how to take our foot off the gas. So we're just going to keep going and striving and just pressing our shoulder to that ceiling. So now that things have changed for our young men in the world, we don't know how to, like, I mean, I don't know that we should have to take our foot off the gas and turn around and go back and see how we can sort of scoop up. It's like, listen, this is how we've had to subsist for eons. So it's confusing to us, a scenario where our young men struggle to find that within themselves. And it's heartbreaking to see, right? It's, like, how can we be allies then to the struggle that these young men are going through, but yet at the same time be true to who we are and the struggle that we've had and where we are, where we'd like to be. It's really rough, and I think that our trans community is going through some real severe backlash, and um, just, it's like these communities are the ones that suffer first when we start to backslide in, the realm of civil rights. And so how do we, continue to help pull them up so that they don't get steamrolled by this whole nonsense? It's, so we probably need to create that same allyship for these young men that just are struggling to find themselves, figure out who they are, what they want to be. I feel that if we don't have a really good goal, something to strive for, something that our heart speaks to, we find ourselves, stuck in this situation where, it's the whole, like, idle hands, make great work for the devil kind of thing. It's, what are you going to build in your mind if you are stuck in a place where you're not moving forward and you're not striving for anything, you're not trying to create something for yourself, whether it be community or job or creative enterprise. Like, without that creative enterprise, without that goal, without that striving, what do you become? And I feel like some of our young men are starting to show us, what you become in that situation.
100%. You just pitched my book in its totality. My book is called, and I'm not pitching my book again on my
No,
podcast.
I'm
I'm
gonna
just
go pick it up.
illustrating that you nailed it, which is my book is Johnny Fazuli and the Transfinite Reality Engine. Johnny is a hustler Gen Z male who epitomized all the worst qualities of my people and me. And Penny Pitts is the conscientious Gen Z overachiever female. And Johnny ostensibly builds this fake reality engine to impress and compete with Penny in his own absurdist hustler kind of way. And he hires a trans scientist to do it out of expedience. So, in a cauldron of politics and culture and gender wars, I throw it all into the mix and it blows up. And I felt that to me is these are the factors that resonate the most right now. We're so blinded and distracted by war, by nonsense on
Money.
X. These are we got to figure out the gender war. We gotta this trans problem is a national embarrassment, and it sets us decades back in terms of personal freedom. And I'm so frustrated as a dude. Look, I'm a white bald dude, and I see that we're blowing ourselves up with this kind of anti woke nonsense.
It, it what are we doing to these poor people that have already
Yeah.
been through enough, right? And I'm saying this as a woman. Like, women have been like, we have been through a lot. Come on. Like, can we get a break? And that's why it's such a straight line for us to feel that empathy for the trans community as well, because they have been through enough. Like, I mean, having to fight and scrape and scrap for every bit of rights that they have that taken away, and for women, for everything that we have strived to achieve, in recent decades, to have it all, like, it's getting snapped up and taken away from us so quickly. And like, the new bills are trying to take away our voting rights at this point. Like, they want us to be second class citizens again. They want the trans community to be second class citizens again. It's always that other, and then we've got a community of young men who don't know how to find themselves and become, genuine feeling human beings that you have some sense of purpose and goal, and an ability to strive for something good in their lives. And we're failing them as well. We're failing so many people on so many levels right now. It's frightening to see. It's going to be interesting to see how we pick ourselves up. I think there's a lot of hope to be had, especially with the recent Hungary election.
I'm Hungarian, and I congratulated my
Nice.
Hungarian relatives. I reached out. Now, speaking of AI, I use it to translate. My Hungarian is terrible. It's on like a fifth grade level because I grew up with it.
It's better than
So
mine.
I have chatty bro chants like congratulations. You finally got rid of Mr. Orban. But there are hopeful signs, and it's a pendulum that keeps swinging back. And frankly, the left has had its own excesses and ridiculous nonsense, and it keeps oscillating radically back and forth. We just need a sense of reasonableness, humanity, empathy, and fairness, which is just lacking. And my book, I tried to just highlight what goes wrong when you don't have those qualities. So my trans scientist, she's up at the University of Hamilton. I just changed some names, from Madison to Hamilton, nudge, nudge. And she gets doged,
Yeah.
right? And she's gifted, and she deals with prejudice. And then the attitude at a very ostensibly liberal university flips because of the current administration. And she realizes that her best chance is with this Gen Z loser hustler, because at least this guy will let her do her research to build a universe jumping machine that he doesn't think can ever work, that he just wants to use to extort people's investment money. It's fun. At the very least, I bring up all of this that the mess we're into makes for great writing.
Yeah.
And you do something similar with personal growth,
Yeah.
with these kind of reconnoiter D&D, Lord of the Rings, Narnia worlds, where it's kind of like 2.0. It's very contemporary, And you're looking at it through the lens of a woman writing in 2023, 24, 25, 26, right?
Exactly.
Pretty fun.
You get me.
I want our viewers and listeners to get your stuff. Like, comment, share, subscribe, everyone. Check out Catherine's work in the links below. And good luck with your marketing, Miss Introvert. I find it challenging too, just to pull it all together and get attention. And doing it on your own is hard too. Now that you've thrown off the shackles of this trad publishing myth in ways that they're you can get signed with the biggest publisher and they won't necessarily do things for you. And they expect you to do most of your marketing. And this is not even new. Like I cited James Elroy, the author of LA Confidential, who is very talented. He's old school, but I love that guy. From the beginning, he's at book signings, book fairs. The guy is almost 7 feet tall and he's awkward and weird. And he's always out there peddling his books. And I think we have to do that too.
Yeah.
Whether electronically or one way or another, we got to leave our writer's cave.
Yep. And we can't treat it like a speed bump either, right? Like right now, I'm struggling with that. I want to get this like Winter Forest marketing out of the way so I can get straight to work on Crown of Fire. And, it's like, because to me right now, I'd rather just be 100% focused on Crown of Fire. I've got a really great idea. I've got it outlined. I really want to just go in and start writing. But I do need to, get the word out about Winter Forest because it is a really great story. It's a great tie for the first 3 books. It's something that I don't want to let just fall by the wayside and just let it, kind of die on the vine either. So thank you so much.
It sounds like you're still working. You're working full time and you're commuting.
That's 2 hours a day. LA traffic. Woo.
Oh my God. Are you in Silicon Valley doing the Silicon Valley thing?
Southern California.
Good luck to you. Perhaps that's the biggest takeaway here, folks. If you're an aspiring writer, if you're a writer who's struggling, the struggle is real and we need to multitask. We can't be wholly committed to just content or distribution. And we need to somehow balance these often mutually contradictory, very frustrating capabilities and demands on our resourcing and time just to be heard. I liken it to Horton Hears a Who, the Who people. We are here. We are here. We are here.
Yep.
Just keep up there at the top of the clouds with your little Who megaphone. I am here. I am here. And sooner or later, a Horton with those, he's an elephant, so you get the big ears. He's able to hear coming from the little plant, right, or a little cotton ball.
That's how it feels. That's how it feels.
And you did it at the conference, like you got your little thing. I am here, and you're doing this podcast, and I'm podcasting and connecting with great authors like you. So
it's a great platform. It's a really great way to get a voice out there.
Absolutely. So thank you so much, Catherine. Wish you the best. I'd love to have you back on when number 4 comes out. We could talk about it some more, get you more reach, and catch up with you. I had a wonderful time talking to you. Thank you.
I'm really glad that we met, Mookie. This has been a real blast. Thank you so much.
Thank you. To be continued.